Hi guys, how are you? Thanks so much for coming along. Sorry about the slight delay in starting, just there was a couple of people still joining us. So welcome to the Practical Psychology Meetup, Thinking Traps with Julie O Sullivan. Sorry, I just have someone in the chat is asking if this will be recorded, and the intention is, I'm not sure when we'll be able to put it up, but we might, we'll be in touch by email after the event, and we might let you guys know what we intend to do with the recording at that point. So first off, thanks very much for coming. I know tonight's a free event, but I'm very aware that it's about your payment, your time and your attention, which are probably two of the most valuable things you have. I'd also like to thank Julie for coming down as well. So we'll introduce her in just a moment. So just to talk a little bit about the meetup group, if that's okay. So our Practical Psychology Meetup, which is kind of what we're running the event on tonight, is, I suppose it's got three main aims. So firstly, we try to help people better understand themselves. Then we want to help people better understand what it is they want. And then we want to help them understand both the practical and psychological barriers getting in the way to them achieving what they want. So in that line, we've got Julie O Sullivan here to speak with us tonight. So Julie is a business psychologist, trainer and facilitator for Kinch Lines. She's passionate about improving working life. She combines her understanding of the science of human behavior with the experience of the world of work to strive for a more effective performance and long-term growth for individuals. Julie has also got international facilitation experience. She has provided training internationally in topics such as emotional intelligence, team effectiveness, decision-making, and resilience, as well as regularly conducting one-to-one development sessions with people. Having graduated with first-class honours in both her applied psychology undergrad and masters in work and organisational psychology, Julie has also completed an advanced diploma in personal leadership and executive coaching. Okay, so I'm going to hand you over to Julie now for the rest, and we'll talk to you guys at the end.
Thanks a lot for that, Jason. I was trying to not do the Irish thing of cringing while you just read out all about me. But good evening, everyone. How are you doing? I hope you're all doing well. Actually, even if you want to let me know how you are doing, just pop it into the chat there. How is the energy? Like Jason said there, you know, your energy and your time is such a valuable resource. So thank you so much for joining me and spending a bit of time with me. Let me see. So yeah, perfect. We're saying we're feeling great, fantastic. Yeah, it's nice to virtually meet you all. I would say as well, if you are able to turn on your camera, that would be brilliant. It's nice to always get a bit of face-to-face or virtual face-to-face interaction, which we're probably missing quite a bit at the moment. Okay, brilliant. Oh, a lot of people are doing well, doing wonderful. Everyone's doing great. Fantastic. Okay, brilliant. Thanks so much, guys. So yeah, I do think that starting off as, you know, how are you? How is your energy? Checking in with yourself is definitely an important question. So as I said, thanks so much for choosing to spend a bit of time with me today as we chat about a topic that I'm really interested in, which is thinking traps. So these traps or biases or shortcuts that our minds take have an impact on our decision making, how we interpret information, how we view others, how we interact with others. So it has a lot of, you know, implications in the real world, at home and in work. So I hope that you can even come away from today with even just one golden nugget of information or one key takeaway, you know, just one, you know, new way of thinking about something that you hadn't thought about before. So yeah, as Jason said, I'm a business psychologist. So my job really, you know, it's combining that head for business with the heart for people. So I've always been quite interested in psychology, understanding, you know, people, how they think and behave. And I wanted to apply that to the world of work because a lot of us spend so much time in work. So we might as well try and make it as good as possible. So I thought that'd be a valuable route to go down and use that interest in psychology. So I work with a company called Kinch Lines, and one part of our job would be, you know, consulting, so helping companies with their talent selection and development. And then the other part is supporting other consultants, coaches, psychologists, HR professionals, basically people who do similar work to us. So we would train and support them with their professional development. Okay. So that's basically what I do, but a lot of my work would be using these kind of this kind of insight in a work context, but as I said, it's really relevant both in work and at home. So what we are covering today, as I said, is those mental shortcuts that our minds take. So I'll give a few examples. I mean, there's too many to list in the space of an hour, but I've just chosen a couple of examples, give you an idea of different contexts of where they might show up, and then what we can do to manage them. How can we be more aware of them? So I will be asking for your input as well. If you are open to sharing your insights, I would love to hear them. So I suppose most people are probably muted at the moment, but at certain stages, I'll ask you to maybe unmute yourself or pop your answers into the chat. So as I said, hopefully you'll get, begin to start thinking about different things in different ways. And I think if everyone shares their insights, that'll help that happen. Okay, so what I want to do just to start off is I'm going to tell a little story and I want you to visualize it, okay? So I will tell you about a morning that I had last week, and I'll tell you about some great interactions that I had. So I want you to picture these as vividly as you possibly can. Okay, so it was one day before work. It was a lovely day, so I decided to get up and go for a walk. On my way out of my house, I ran into my neighbours. So they are a married couple, and we were just discussing, how they're getting on, juggling two young kids, trying to work at the same time. So we just chatted about how they're juggling that work and homeschooling. And so then I continued on my walk, and I decided to give my friend Oisín a call. So we had a bit of a chat. He was just saying how he went out to Kerry for a holiday, and he went swimming in the sea every day, and was just describing the really gorgeous scenery that he saw there. And then I started work, and the first thing that I had was a video call with a client who was the CEO of a tech company. And so software engineering background, but has now started this new company. So that was a really interesting and exciting conversation. Okay, so that is a little story that I've asked you to visualize, and I want to just ask you a couple of questions about it. You don't have to answer out loud, but just have a little think to yourself. So when I asked you to picture the married couple, did you picture two men? When I asked you to picture my friend Oisín, was he Asian? And when I said that I spoke to the CEO of a tech company, did you picture a woman? So I'd be surprised if you answered yes to all of those questions. Now not trying to say that that means you're negatively biased against any of those people, but it was just basically done to illustrate that when we're faced with missing information or gaps in a story, our brains just automatically fill in those gaps. And it does that very quickly without much effort on our part. You can see how naturally it came there. If I ask you to picture a married couple, for example, it's more common that it's a man and a woman, so that's probably what you pictured. As I said, doesn't mean that there's negative biases there, it's just an indication that our brains take shortcuts. So our brains are these really powerful computers, basically, if you think of them like that, they use up a lot of energy because they are quite powerful. You can see there, our brains are generally only about 2% of our body weight, but they take up about 20% of the oxygen and calories that we have to consume. Okay. So if it's this big computer which uses a lot of power, it's being programmed to try to save energy where it can. So it needs to use those shortcuts. So if there's missing information in a picture or a gap in a story, we just fill in those gaps automatically where we can. So we quickly access previous knowledge, and we rely on what is most common or familiar to us. So as I said, when I told you those stories, you just drew on whatever information came most readily to you. And so that is just an illustration of a little shortcut that our minds take. So with that in mind, I want to do a little bit of a a little bit of a maths problem. Okay, so, shake off the cobwebs off our, I know it's evening time, maybe we're finished our work for the day, but let's do a quick little maths problem because everybody loves maths. So we have a little problem here. It's just quick and simple. You can pop your answer into the chat. So a bat and a ball costs €1.10 in total. The bat costs €1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Okay, so pretty easy. If you want to write your answers there into the chat box. Whatever you guys think. The only answer that's coming in is from Donal. And I'd say, I wonder, have you seen this before, Donal? Yeah, a few people have seen it before. Yeah, exactly. I was trying to prime you and trick you a little bit by saying it's a really quick and easy, very simple problem. So initially, a lot of people, when they see this problem for the very first time, they will see the answer 10 cent, okay? Because I think that's kind of the intuitive answer, right? The bat costs €1 more than the ball, so you just say, oh yeah, 10 cent, €1, that makes €1 10 cent. It appears to be more simple than it is, but as a few people have pointed out, the correct answer is actually 5 cents. So again, our brains can sometimes think, oh, there's a quick and easy route, I'll take that one. And you rely on that intuitive answer that comes very easily to us, because we don't really realize often that we need to engage in more effortful processing. Okay, so when we talk about these, the quick shortcuts that we take versus the more effortful processing, there are basically two types, two styles when it comes to decision making. We'll say system 1 is heuristic, system 2 is analytic. So heuristic is that one that, as I mentioned, it's intuitive. It takes the shortcuts. It is very quick and easy, doesn't take a lot of effort. As I said, when you see €1 10 cent, you might think 10 cent, yeah, easy, I can rely on the quick and easy method. But the more slow and deliberate type of thinking is the more analytic thinking style. So it demands a lot more brain power. And we're said to be cognitive misers. So we try as much as possible to just use system 1, because again, why waste energy when we don't need to? And that quick thinking can be really useful to our survival. If I'm standing in the middle of a road and a car is coming towards me, I don't need to try and think of how I might calculate the speed of the car or, weigh up the possible negative consequences of staying in the road. Like, I just act as quickly as possible. Instinct kicks in and just tells me I'm in danger. So it is really useful. It's also useful because when we have those simple tasks, we don't need to use a lot of brain power every time we have to, deal with a simple task. Again, like if I said, what's 2 plus 2, you could hopefully figure out that it's 4 quite quickly and easily. Whereas if I said it is what's 692 times 74, you might have to think about it a little bit more and engage in that effortful processing. Or just get a calculator. So these two different styles are in a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. It's a really brilliant book. It's won a lot of awards. And it just basically, differentiates that difference between the system 1 and the system 2. So why and how our brains take those shortcuts. So as I said, system 1 is really useful. Sometimes we do need to be able to think quite quickly. But the downside is it can also mean, the way that you remember or think about a particular situation can be biased for a number of reasons. So it can lead to biased decision making. So a quote from Daniel Kahneman is that we're blind to our blindness. We have very little idea of how little we know. So that's another, I suppose, in a way, kind of a flaw of our design. We're designed not to know how little we actually know. So that's why these thinking traps are these hidden traps. They're not something that's immediately obvious, and it may be something we need to think about. When I say cognitive bias, I think sometimes, especially people if you don't have a psychology background, the word cognitive can sometimes be a bit off-putting, so I just wanted to clarify. So cognition, so when you hear cognitive, that's all about thinking, acquiring knowledge, and understanding. And then a bias is that basically a systematic pattern of deviation from the norm. So it is, basically how we think about the world does not always reflect reality. It's often said that we see the world as we are rather than how the world is. So again, as I said, the way that you remember a particular situation can be biased, again, as I mentioned, because of those shortcuts that our minds take. So that is what we are talking about today. That was just a quick little introduction to it. And as I said, there are countless different kinds of thinking traps that we can fall into. But for today, I've just broken it down into 3 different areas. So we've got how we interpret words and information, how we see others, and how we work in a group or a team. Okay, so those are the 3 areas that I'm just focusing on today. So I want to do a little activity with you and use the poll function. So I'm going to give you 4 different statements, and I want to ask you just how profound you think that they are. So profound meaning of deep meaning, of great significance. Okay, so deep and significant, basically. I will start launching that poll there. So that should come up on your screen now. So I'll just read them out as you're answering. So the first one is hidden meaning transforms unparalleled abstract beauty. Second one is nature is a self-regulating ecosystem of awareness. Third one there is consciousness is the growth of coherence and of us. And the fourth one, as you self-actualize, you will enter into infinite empathy that transcends understanding. Okay? So how profound do you think each of those statements are? So I can see a couple of the answers coming in there. I'll give you a couple of minutes just to allow that to go on. So there's no right or wrong answers, and also your responses are anonymous, so it won't show your name of how you voted. Let's see a few more coming in. I'll just give you another couple of minutes. You can see there's quite a mixture. Some people saying, different things for each of those statements. Just give you another couple of seconds. Nearly got everybody. Okay. All right, I will just end the polling there and I'll share the results with you. Okay, so for the first one, hidden meaning transforms unparalleled abstract beauty. The most popular answer there was not at all profound, but 30% of people were saying somewhat profound, 20% said quite profound, and 15% said very profound. So as you can see, quite just a fairly even spread of, difference of opinions there. For the second one, nature is a self-regulating ecosystem of awareness. The most popular answer there was somewhat profound. So 40% of people said it was somewhat profound, and 30% said it was very profound. The third one, consciousness is the growth of coherence and of us. The most popular answer there was very profound. So 30% of people said that. And 25% each said quite profound or not at all profound. And then the fourth one, as you self-actualize, you'll enter into infinite empathy that transcends understanding. The most popular answer there was quite profound. Okay, so you can see there's quite a bit of a difference in terms of different perceptions of how profound or not those were perceived to be. But what these actually are are called pseudo-profound bullshit. So apologies for the profanity as well. I know that maybe that's a bit offensive, but that's actually what it is called in the psychological literature. So I didn't want to change it too much. But basically, these statements are randomly generated, and they are designed to sound profound and sound meaningful and sound significant, but they actually don't really contain any significant truth or meaning. So it's not lying, because lying is a deliberate manipulation of the truth. You know the truth and you are changing it. This is just designed to impress rather than convey meaning. It's designed to suit the purpose of the speaker. And of course, it is ubiquitous. Like, it's really something that we actually come in contact with quite a bit. Even if you think of Twitter, like the necessity for tweets to be succinct, which, you know, a maximum of 280 characters, may make it more susceptible to bullshit. And so there's actually this scale that they've come up with, the bullshit receptivity scale. If you guys are interested in this, I can maybe share the research paper, or else you can just Google. So it's Gordon Pennycook is the main researcher, and it's on the reception and detection of pseudo-profound bullshit. They actually found as well, they've done a few different studies using this scale. One of the things they found was that in a sample of United States residents, they found that politically conservative people were more likely to see profoundness in bullshit statements. So I found that quite interesting. And I've popped a little picture of the fake news. You know, it's something that I suppose has become so common that we hear about quite a bit. That quote there is from a guy called Harry Frankfurt, who said that he believes bullshit is a greater enemy of the truth than lies are. Because again, lies can be disproven, but bullshit is just meaningless rhetoric that can really mislead people. I think someone in the chat said pretentious nonsense. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and as I said, you know, in the world that we're living in at the moment, like, there is so much information out there, and we can find evidence to support basically any opinion. So there does also seem to be this belief at the moment that, you know, the plural of anecdotes is data. You know, that if you hear a story enough times, then it must be fact, because it just gets into our heads and it gets reinforced. So going back to the shortcuts that I mentioned that we do take, you know, as I said, our brains, they have a habit of looking for patterns in just coincidental occurrences. And if we see those patterns, we start to give them significant meaning. And that is one of the reasons why we can be subject to confirmation bias. So we tend to interpret and favor and recall information that confirms or supports our beliefs. So if we already have a particular belief and we find information that supports that, brilliant, we're happy with that and we're ready to accept it. I have a little cartoon that kind of illustrates that. So he's saying, I've heard the rhetoric from both sides, time to do my own research on the real truth, and then, you know, just type it into Google and literally the first link agrees with what you already believe, and you think, okay, brilliant, I have no reason to change or challenge my viewpoint. You know, you can, I suppose, hopefully imagine how that can lead to issues then. And actually, I don't know if anyone's ever done this before, but so I've definitely done it, where I've read something online and then later on I go to maybe recall it to someone else, and as it's coming out of my mouth, I think, actually, that can't be right. Surely that's not true. And it can sometimes be one of those things that it just goes into our minds without us really realizing. And then as we go to say it, you go, that can't be right. And it might not be. It might be something that's completely made up. So it is definitely something to bear in mind, especially in the world that we are living in, is that we do tend to rely on those immediate examples when we're making judgments. So it's really important to remind ourselves of that as we interpret things. So that was the first section there about interpreting words and information and the biases we can take there. I want to go on now just to how we see others. So as I said, there are countless examples that we could draw on, but I've just picked a couple. So the first one I want to highlight is called egocentrism. And this is basically the assumption that others share our perspective or the same perception as we do. So it can be difficult for us to remind ourselves that people see things completely differently. And we need to recognize and remind ourselves that everyone does have different values, different personalities, different upbringings, experiences, culture, and so on, that all really influence how they see the world, and it could be completely different to your own. The second one is called in-group bias. That one is basically that we tend to favor and prefer, people who we like and who are like us. And we tend to exclude or judge those who are different. And that's even if the groups are arbitrary. So this one would have implications, if you think about, say, for example, if people are in companies making hiring decisions, if they say, oh, I don't think he or she would really fit in, is that an indication that it's just a bias that's coming through, that we have our group and this is how we like it and we don't want someone who's different? And again, there could be so many different reasons why that would make someone different, but diversity can be absolutely essential to high performance like work teams. So the third one there is attribution bias or fundamental attribution error. And this is basically, we tend to judge people on their actions, but we judge ourselves based more on our intent. So when we're judging others' behaviors, we have a tendency to overemphasize personal characteristics and ignore the situational factors. So I have the example there of, thinking another person is ineffective because they made a mistake. So you might say, oh, my colleague did this particular job poorly and their manager complained. It's probably because my colleague is lazy or unintelligent. Whereas if you're saying, oh, I did my job poorly and my manager complained, but it's because I'm so busy at the moment and I wasn't given enough information to do the job well. So we tend to have those slight biases in terms of how we judge others versus how we judge ourselves. And of course, there are a number of other biases that relate to how we view others, and they are so important to be mindful of. I'll go into this in a little bit more detail later, but the two things that I believe are key skills when it comes to managing these biases, reminding ourselves of two skills: empathy and curiosity. If we remind ourselves to exercise those two skills, I think it's a really great start to overcoming those biases. And just as well to note that empathy isn't endorsement. Empathy doesn't mean that you agree with someone and support them in everything they do, but it just means that you've humanized them and you've recognized, as I said, they might be coming from a completely different perspective. And it's just about being curious and non-judgmental to try and explore that a bit. And if we're using those two skills of empathy and curiosity, I think we can be more inclined to go towards that high-performing zone, where people feel valued and included and respected. That's obviously the zone that we want to be operating in. We want everybody to be in. The extreme end over on the left is, where someone's being abused or harassed. And that's where those negative biases are actually being acted upon in a negative way. There's also that zone that some teams or workplaces may be in where there is diversity, but maybe it's not recognized or celebrated. It's merely ignored or tolerated. And so that's where you have that bit in the middle. It's just a limiting zone. It's not really, people probably aren't going to be completely engaged with that team if they only just feel tolerated. So obviously we want to move towards the high performance zone where each person feels respected and included in values. And that involves actively challenging any pre-existing beliefs and trying not to simply look for negative patterns of behavior. So as I mentioned, we try to look for those patterns naturally. So again, if we believe, okay, my colleague is lazy, anytime they do something, we're noticing, oh yeah, that's them being lazy, that's them, you tend to pick up on that more, and you're seeking those negative patterns. Whereas if we move towards being more empathetic and curious, it's helping us to be less judgmental and move into that high performing zone. So I'm curious being curious, since March, since the whole lockdown, what has changed about the information that you are now getting from other people? I know there's been so many changes, but if you want to just pop it into the chat, and actually, or even if you feel more comfortable, you can unmute yourselves if that's easier. But are you getting more or less insight into their personal lives? Are you seeing a different side of them? Are you missing seeing them in person? How are you adapting? What's changing? So as I said, feel free to pop something in the chat, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. Or as I said, you can unmute yourselves if that's easier. From my own personal example, I've noticed, like, I'm seeing my colleagues' children a bit more, and in some ways that makes me feel a bit closer to her, because it's that kind of picture of the whole person rather than just the work person. So yeah, Jason's saying less body language. Absolutely, there's a lot of non-verbal cues that we are definitely missing out on. There is someone else saying, that uncertainty is causing that anxiety, which is totally normal, because anxiety is just that response to ambiguity and uncertainty. Anxiety is our brain trying to, worry about everything and predict everything when we feel very uncertain. So that's, yeah, perfectly normal. Greater sharing of personal information, less formality. Yeah, I think a lot of people are starting to break down, instead of seeing someone only in a suit and tie, maybe they're seeing them in the more casual clothing or settings where they're more relaxed. Missing seeing friends in person, but having more Zoom chats with friends and family. Yeah, so I think a lot of us are adapting and being creative and trying to think of new ways to connect with each other. Tess is saying, I think I've become more sensitive to body language now when I meet someone in person. Yeah, so you're suddenly getting even more data in as you meet with someone, or as they're saying, more of a data overload of email and presentations. Absolutely. Increased optimism about the future. That's brilliant. I was surprised how many people believe in conspiracy theories. Yeah, that's a new bit of information that you're getting. Shared humanity, everyone in the same boat. Yeah, I do think so. I think that whole idea of empathy is getting tested a little bit. People are seeing, oh, actually, everyone is in some ways in the same boat, and in some ways in very different situations. Yeah, innovation, opportunities, having more interactions over video calls, so feeling less connected in some aspects. Yeah, absolutely. So is there anything then that we can do to adapt and manage this? Anything that's been working for you over the last, couple of months? Would anyone like to share anything there? Okay, brilliant. So Elizabeth, you're saying more open, honest discussion about mental health among our team. That is brilliant. And again, like, there's of course a lot of negatives of this whole situation, but if there are definitely some positives coming out. Yeah, any other being mindful about people's circumstances? Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good one to bear in mind. Even sending an email, a lot of people are using different language and being a bit more considerate, I think. Acknowledging the stories we tell ourselves and the anxiety it may, cause us. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so acknowledging those stories that we tell ourselves. So yeah, requesting clients to put on camera on Zoom. Interesting, as some people are reluctant to do this. Yeah, absolutely. I think it adds that just a little bit of an extra element. But yeah, I've done training before and where you're just looking at a screen and you're not even sure if people are there. So it can be definitely a bit more tricky when people are reluctant. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for sharing those, guys. As I said, it's good to just have a little think about how things are changing and how we're adapting to that. Okay, so I will go on then to the third area, which is about how we work as part of a group or part of a team. So even from some of those comments we've been touching on there, we've talked about how we're now interacting with your team and the people close to you. So does this look familiar to anyone? Imagine being on a Zoom call. We're saying, okay, so we're all in agreement here. Everyone is saying yes, but there are a couple of other things going on within people's minds. So some people are saying, they're thinking, I don't want to be negative. I'm not really sure about this idea, but I don't want to come across as doubting everything. Someone else might say, I don't fully understand what we're doing, but I don't want to seem stupid. I don't want to voice that. Another person might say, or they might think, I don't want to waste everyone's time or to start an argument. And another person there might think, I'm the only one who disagrees, so I must be wrong. If everyone agrees, then let's go with that. So there are two at play here that I'm focusing on, and it's groupthink and false consensus. So two kind of biases coming in there. That false consensus is everybody thinks that. When there's actually not really a consensus, as we can see from this picture. So if any of you are leaders of people, I would say to remind yourself that silence is not golden. It is really important for your team and the people around you to feel safe enough to speak up if they disagree with something. I think that really is often leader-led. So when people have questions or reservations about something, that can be really valuable. It can really enhance decision making if it's dealt with well. And again, diversity in a team, if it's managed well, if we're in that space where team members feel, like we said, valued and respected and included, it can then increase problem solving capabilities and enhance creativity. There's a good bit of research that would back up the idea that a diverse team can be brilliant problem solvers and decision makers, but that's only if sufficient effort is made to make sure that everyone is included and at that high performing zone that we saw on the other slide. If you are someone who is in a team and you find it difficult to voice disagreements, again, maybe it's to do with the leader, maybe it's to do with your own skills or your own beliefs in yourself. If you find it difficult to voice those disagreements in a way that is listened to, I would say just practicing getting your point across clearly and respectfully. So it's that balancing act of being direct and being considerate. Balance courage with compassion. And I think if you lead with those, it's going to begin to break down that whole idea of groupthink and getting a false consensus. So something that is, when we talk about groupthink, something to remind ourselves is that it is very natural. Like our ancestors lived in tribes and they have that natural instinct to fit in because they rely on each other. So if we, if our ancestors in their tribe caused dissent and problems within it, they could be kicked out, which would be harmful to their survival. So there is a natural, inclination towards trying to keep things harmonious and trying to avoid conflict. But in a work team, it can lead to irrational or dysfunctional decision making. So, we are definitely fallible and we need that challenge. Like if something doesn't feel right, we need to be able to challenge it. So what do you think? Anyone have any ideas of what we can do to avoid groupthink? Maybe anything you've done in the past that worked for you, or anything you think that we should do more of? Any ideas? Okay, so Carmen is saying that she just assumes in her work that there's a lack of consensus and asks the teams what they see as potential issues. Yeah, absolutely. So looking for dissent in a way. Constructive feedback sandwich. I think that's where you got the positive and then the negative sandwich between another positive. Ask questions to the quieter team members. Absolutely. The people who don't naturally feel comfortable speaking up. As a leader, not to lead with the solution or answer, but focus on the questions to deep dive into the situation. Absolutely, Orla. Very coaching approach, of course. But yeah, exactly. Not just saying, here's what we're going to do, because then you might think, okay, I guess that's what we're doing. There's no room for discussion there. Try and have diversity within the team. Absolutely. Encourage debate, play devil's advocate, definitely. Within a group, are introverts catered for? What is the best way to do this? Yeah, so again, the people who don't necessarily feel so comfortable speaking up and in front of everyone and having their voice heard, is there a way to make sure that they have their voice heard? And I do think asking people directly is a good one. Jason saying provide anonymous ways of input. So for example, a suggestion box, absolutely. And even a virtual suggestion box is definitely possible as well. Yeah, and see if any others are coming in at the moment. Yeah, breakout groups is a great one as well. Because again, like if I was to ask you to speak up in front of this whole group, it might be a little bit more daunting. Whereas if I say go off and have a little chat in 2 or 3 people, it's a lot easier for a lot of people. Orla says use brainwriting as a technique to create solution with everyone's input. That sounds brilliant. Allow space for people to contribute online via feedback surveys, polls. They can be more open feedback, absolutely. Quieter people may be more anxious to speak up, maybe uncomfortable if asked directly, in my experience. Yeah, absolutely, Elizabeth. So yeah, all depends on how you approach it. So yeah, it really does. I think it's how you set it up. It's not necessarily just the one action, saying, okay, what do you think? I think that really creating the environment where it's safe to disagree. And that doesn't just happen, it's not just a once-off thing. I think it's very much cultivated over time. So psychological safety is one of the key components of a high-performing team. And that's basically the idea that it is okay to fail or to make a mistake. It is this perception that you won't be penalized for speaking up. You won't be blamed for coming up with a different opinion or a mistake. And again, that's really helpful to allow people to voice their opinion safely. Again, regardless of if they're introverts or extroverts or their levels of experience, they're just met with, again, empathy and curiosity from their team. They've created this environment that it is safe to speak up or to voice an opinion or a mistake. The other factor that I came up with there, which I think was mentioned as well in the chat, is to seek different perspectives, different personalities, different backgrounds, different areas or levels of expertise. Again, sometimes I've seen job ads before where they're saying, oh, you must have 10 years experience in the pharmaceutical industry. And I just wonder, is that definitely the best candidate, just because they've had the same experience in the same industry? Might it be valuable to get someone from a completely different industry? Yeah, maybe there might be a steeper learning curve initially, but the add that they could bring to a team could be really worth it. So it's seeking diversity, and not just diversity that you can clearly see, but even just like that, the backgrounds, the personalities. And again, a few people I think mentioned the devil's advocate. So even if one person must challenge the solution or the status quo, that is a tactic that's used in the Israeli army. It's the 10th man. Their job is, so if there's a room full of 10 people and 9 of them agree, the 10th person has to challenge conventional wisdom. The aim, I suppose, for that is to look at things creatively, look at it independently and from a fresh perspective. So that will hopefully actively engage people in the decision-making process and help them to reconsider the status quo so that they're not just accepting the norm. So those are a couple of the techniques or tactics that I've come up with. What else? Does anyone want to share anything else that has worked for them in the past? Maybe they've become aware of particular biases that they may have. Anyone feel free to share what else we can do to manage biases. You might be sitting there thinking, well, that's why I came on the webinar, so that you would tell me. But I'd be interested in just hearing, what your insights are as well, because we all do have experience with this.
Hi, it's Elizabeth here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I have any wild insight, but I suppose from my experience, one of the things that I'm very conscious of, that we tend to rush to do as companies is to say, oh, let's send people on bias training. Let's get somebody else in to talk. And I'm always very conscious that if we do that, that there is, psychological rigor underpinning the provider that we use or the course that we provide, because I think that's very important, because even in the interpretation of bias and the language around it, if we're not fully au fait with that, we can misinterpret and we can deliver the wrong messages, and so that can then get trickled down in an incorrect way to people that are attending the training. So I think as us as maybe any of us that have that option as leaders or choosers of that training is to be very mindful in that aspect, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's brilliant insight. Yeah, it really, where what's the source? Again, going back to the thing we talked about at the start of the confirmation bias. Is it like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is what a bias is. Let's just tell everyone that. Yeah, there needs to be a lot of scientific rigor behind it. Absolutely. Anyone else? Any insights? Someone in the chat? Mindfulness is a good one. Yeah, checking in on a regular basis. I'd absolutely agree with that, because it's just pausing and recognizing, how am I feeling, how am I thinking, and doing so in a non-judgmental way. So yeah, practicing that can really enhance our ability to catch those thinking traps. Carmen says, one thing I've seen is when managers see someone is skilled at something, they tend to over rely on them and as a result burn them out. That is so common. It's like, if you want something done, ask a busy person, and like then they just get so much on. And yeah, so Carmen, you're saying my approach as a supervisor has been to get staff who are weak in skills or tasks to engage in it more, and until they build the skill or confidence in performing that task. And in that way, they actually have the skill, it's built up. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think it's so common, yeah, to go, oh, they're the high potential, high performers. We'll go straight to them for everything. But yeah, if you get more people involved and getting them to really own it, I think it'll be much more engaged. And you're not going to be relying on the shortcuts again of, oh, that's the easiest person to ask. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just share a couple of my ones that I think, a lot of us have kind of talked about already. But the first one is, confronting that we do all have biases. Remember at the start, I just asked you to, picture something in your mind, and your brain automatically took shortcuts and maybe relied on previous experience. So reminding ourselves that we are subjective, we have biases, we have emotions that can cloud our judgment. So it's about examining and challenging your current beliefs. And that's very much like, you can do that yourself. Because sometimes we talk about this and we're like, oh, well, my manager needs to do this and my friend needs to do that. Like, these are all very personal in terms of what we can do. The second one then is embrace diversity. And again, it may be visible or it may not. So familiarity reduces fear of the unknown and the unexpected. And the more different experiences you have of different people doing different things in different ways, the more comfortable you're likely to be. So when you're faced with something unexpected or unfamiliar, we often get a stress response triggered, just a natural response. And again, in the past, that probably was useful. You know, if we were cave people and there was an unexpected predator came along, or, you know, someone from a different tribe came along, we might have to act quickly. But, you know, nowadays it's like I mentioned at the start, you know, thinking of the female tech CEO, that doesn't need a stress response, but it can sometimes still trigger it, because it's just the leftover you know, responses that have existed from our ancestors. So it was helpful in the past, but it's not always helpful now. So the more familiar we are with, you know, just differences, diversity, and the more comfortable we'll become with it. The third one there, I think it was Jude mentioned, mindfulness. So that is the practice of paying attention in the present moment, non-judgmentally, on purpose. Okay, so it heightened awareness really, and it can remind us, you know, that okay, I was relying on system one, I was using those shortcuts. Let me just really pay attention to how I'm, you know, pausing before responding or thinking about a certain situation. And there is a lot of research to support, like, mindfulness just seems to be one of those things that just improves everything. But yeah, biases is one of them as well. I've seen a few papers on that. And then the fourth area that I already mentioned, those two skills of empathy and curiosity. Again, empathy does not mean endorsement. It doesn't mean that you know, agree with and support the person. It just means that you recognize that they're a human, and you can then go into a space of maybe cultivating meaningful conversations, really learning about someone. Again, it's non-judgmental. Okay. And so then, just to even sum them up, basically, I've added on the create psychological safety down to that list as well. So as I said, you know, it's really just creating that space for safety, and that it's okay to experiment and fail. And those are basically I would deem to be my top 5 tips or skills for managing biases and overcoming them as much as possible. We can't completely overcome them, of course, but we can do our best. I also wanted to just mention another tool that may be useful. It's called the implicit association test. Some of you have come across it in the past, but it is free and it's available online, and basically can just give you an idea of different associations that you may have with certain groups. So for example, it can be done with gender or race or disability or age, you know, lots of different options. So if you just Google implicit association test, you'll be able to find that and just get a little bit of insight if you haven't already. But that is basically it from me. I wanted to leave a little bit of Q&A time, but I'll hang around afterwards if anyone has any questions. But as I mentioned at the start, I work with Kinch Lions. We train and support leaders and teams, coaches, psychologists, HR, L&D professionals. So if you are in any of those fields and are looking to improve your skill sets, or, you know, for example, adding any psychometric assessments to your toolkit, please do feel free to get in touch about the certifications that we have on. But that is pretty much it for me. So if you have any questions, I will welcome those now. You can pop them into the chat, or you can just unmute yourselves. But thank you so much for joining me and for engaging and sharing your insights as well. Thanks, Mel.
Julie, I'll go ahead with a question if that's okay. I'm just wondering if you have any recommendations, whether it's books or authors or even any particular skills or activities we can do. I suppose empathy and curiosity came up a couple of times during the talk in terms of a very, very important skill in order to address, I suppose, cognitive biases. Is there any, I suppose, resources you'd recommend in relation to that, or?
Yeah, like I would say the book that I mentioned towards the start of Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and that is a great one just to even get that awareness of how we think. I do quite a bit of work in terms of emotional intelligence, And there is a book called The EQ Edge, which is by Steve Stein. There's also the one by Daniel Goleman, which, yeah, I think it's good as well. But I found the one by Steve Stein, which is called The EQ Edge. It's this orange book. I found that one to just be a bit more practical, a bit more just real world examples. And it's done in kind of easy language. And you can also then do assessments, I think, like empathy and that flexibility. Those are skills that are included within the EQI model of emotional intelligence, which is, you know, Steve Stein is the author of that book and that EQ model. So those would be probably the main ones. I'm sure there's so much others out there, but those are the first ones that come to my mind anyway.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Always. Judith's saying primal leadership. I haven't read it myself, but if that's a recommendation. If anyone else has any recommendations. Thanks, Mags. I'm glad you got something from it. I'm just reading those comments. Everyone is, yeah, regarding psychometrics. Yeah, perfect. I'm just seeing if there's any questions coming in on the chat.
Julie, could I just ask a very super quick question? And it might be a little big, so I'm conscious. Obviously, it's late evening, and don't want to keep everyone. But this is really insightful. It's brilliant. And I suppose in terms of the practical applications for that, and in my role, obviously, I'm in talent acquisition, so I mean, I come up against bias every day of the week. Is there any, probably like similar to Jason's question, is there any resources where it provides how we can challenge biases with empathy and influence changes in approach or behavior with managers, particularly because that's, you know, I can't just call it out and go, that's just so biased, you know. So I'd love if there was some resources that would help.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think the whole range of emotional intelligence skills really come into play here, because, you know, so one aspect of that is self-awareness. So again, pausing and reflecting upon how am I feeling. There's also an aspect of decision making. You know, how do my emotions influence how I'm making a decision? One of the skills within the model that I would usually use is reality testing. That's the skill of basically being able to be objective, you know, take a step back from emotions and our biases as much as we can. As I said, empathy is another skill that's included within that. So I suppose doing an assessment like the EQI can really just begin to enhance that self-awareness. And from there, it can be a case of, okay, what do I need to maybe develop, or what strengths do I have, or what areas can I really focus on in the future? I think often we might know how to be a great decision maker or how to be, you know, objective, but then it's the doing, you know, it's the gap between knowing and doing. So I really think that self-awareness is such a huge part to avoid that gap between not knowing and doing. So yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to share kind of resources, maybe through Jason or something like that, that we can just share books and resources to arm you with as much skills as possible to try and be aware of those.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, guys, we'll definitely be sharing an email afterwards, and so we will share kind of some of the resources. I really like, there is some people are recommending other books in terms of the topic, which I think is really nice. So if anyone has any other books that they want to recommend, feel free to put them up in the chat as well. I think that's very nice. I'll hand you back to Julie again for a couple of minutes, just in case there's any more questions.
Yeah, no, I'm just reading the book recommendations as well. I've read the Nudge and Risk Savvy one. I read the Risk Savvy by Gerd Gigerenzer because I do work with, basically there's a personality assessment that's called the Risk Type Compass, and it extracts the themes of personality that relate to how we make decisions and how we deal with risk and ambiguity and uncertainty. So I got really interested in that whole human side of risk and decision making. So I do think that really is one that definitely is relevant. I'm just reading those. So Jude's saying views on the Freakonomics or expanding thinking and black box thinking, or recommend activities for expanding comfort zone. I think with the comfort zone, like expanding your comfort zone, I think it is really just a case of like figuring out, say if I'm at X and I want to be at Y, how do I get to, what are the small steps that I can get to that destination, and what are the milestones that I'll notice as I go along. So, if I'm at say in terms of my levels of empathy, for example, if I'd say, I'm at a 6 out of 10, I've got a few things going for me, but I'm not quite 10 out of 10. Okay, well, if you're at 6, how do we get to 7? What are those steps that we can take? And what are the, just really incremental expansions of our comfort zone. I think it's just about being really intentional about it. But I don't think I know enough about the black box thinking or Freakonomics to really have much to say on it at the moment. But be interested to learn more about it if anyone wants to share anything on that. Yeah, we can save this chat and maybe share it with everyone as well, because there's a few good book recommendations.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely do that. Well, I think does anyone else have any more questions? We'll just give it another couple of seconds just in case. Okay, so we will share Julie's contact details as well. So if anyone wants to follow up with any of with any further questions, whatever, I'm sure Julie would be happy to oblige. Just to let you know, sorry, now just 1 second. First off, I'd just like to say thank you very, very, very much to Julie. She has kind of come in and done this, and the first person to speak in the group outside of me, so very, very grateful. I hope you all enjoyed it. I definitely got some bits and pieces out of it. Just to let you know about some upcoming events, I'm speaking this Thursday at 12:30 for the iconic offices, and I'm speaking on finding meaning and purpose. And then the next meetup group is going to be, or the next meetup talk is going to be on stress, what it is and what to do with it, on the 8th of September. So we'll share all that in the email afterwards as well. So thanks very much for coming, guys. Thanks again to Julie, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon. And again, any questions or whatever, feel free to get in touch and we'll get right back to you. Okay, thank you so much. Cheers.
Thanks, Emil. Thanks for joining us, guys.